Good morning, everyone. Aloha. As you can see, I've sort of put a Frankenstein slide deck together. We have slides that I've begged, borrowed, and stolen from other presentations. All of the content today I am responsible for. I'm not speaking for Microsoft or Intel or the other people I cite. So if I've inadvertently augmented the information, that's on my shoulders. As Richard described, I'm currently employed as a Director of Venture Integration at Microsoft. I've taken a short leave with my family here as we work on some health projects, but I have had a phenomenal time interacting with the students here and hope to know and meet many more of you. Thanks also for the faculty members who I know personally who are here visiting. I hold you all in high esteem. When I was thinking about what I could offer you today, my mind went back not too long ago to where I sat in your seats. At BYU Provo, I graduated in 2000, so not too long ago, with my undergrad in English. And without hesitation, I can say my favorite part of BYU, period, was this lecture series and the free lunch that came with this lecture series. Every day, and if I ever make it rich, I will personally sponsor the free lunch here at BYU Hawaii. You should all help me be rich just for that reason. But literally, the idea that people come into your campus, come into your lives who want nothing more than to help you. Those people have success and knowledge and connections that they want to offer you. And they are never more complimented than when you come up afterwards and say, I don't know much about this, but man, I was excited about when you spoke. Can we stay in contact? This lecture series, and I recognize I'm the caboose of the semester, but no matter whether you're taking it for credit or not, I would fight to get to this lecture series every week. And it's no small meaning to me that I have actually stayed in contact with at least 3 of the speakers of my BYU Provo version of this class. They've become life mentors to me, and I have actually introduced a few of you to a few of them. So think of yourself a little older, a little bit chubbier, sort of where I am in 12 years from now, and you can picture maybe doing this yourselves if you're lucky. So what I thought of when I reminisce back to these days was the lectures I loved the most. And the ones that I loved the most were, the ones who would come and tell their own story, where they came from and how they got there. I was, losing sleep like some of you are right now, thinking, what am I going to do? I can't see the end from the beginning. I really want a path. And it was helpful to me to have these successful people tell me how they got where they were at. The next thing that I really treasured was them exposing me to new parts of business. I knew I wanted a career in business, but didn't know where, and it was helpful to know what was out there. So today I'm going to share a little of that with you, a little bit about my background and more about the field of high-tech mergers, acquisitions, and because of the nature of the class, the role of the entrepreneur in that cycle. So, a little background on me. This is my career in a nutshell, and most importantly, my family. Amy's never seen this picture before right now. So there's nothing like the element of surprise to stir up marital emotions. But we, like I said, we're here with our 4 young kids. We've been married for almost 14 years, and there's nothing more influential in your life than who you choose to be with for eternity. And Amy's been a part of my career and every other facet, and I give thanks for that. Now, I didn't plan the emotion, 1 second. The other parts that influence heavily what you'll do and how you contribute in the kingdom are where you live. I've had the blessing to live in a lot of diverse places. I encourage that. I encourage you to get away from your home environment. There's nothing more mind expanding than throwing yourself out of your comfort zone. And each of these places have served well for that. Next, education. BYU Jerusalem was amazing. Babson College from my MBA was amazing. BYU Provo, amazing. Here I'm continuing my education. Don't throw out, even if you have that entrepreneurial vein, don't throw out the value of education. There are programs that can be as creative as you want to be. You can find them and enjoy a rich experience. Now, career-wise, currently I'm employed by Microsoft. I've been here for about 4 years. Prior to that, I was with Intel Corporation for about 7 years. They hired me right out of BYU Provo. They gave me a job as a buyer. So most of you haven't heard that term before, but big corporations who need everything from pencils to contracts to semiconductor lithograph machines need someone to negotiate on their behalf. They hired me to do that based on Skybeam Wireless. Skybeam Wireless was a flash-in-the-pan, terrible attempt at a BYU Provo business plan. So I was sitting in a class just like this, and the 2 students who, as partners, had won the previous year's business plan competition got up at the end of the class and said, "Can we have a second?" And the entrepreneur stepped aside and they said, "We won last year's competition. We've got an idea but need a team. Anybody who's interested, step forward." Right? And everybody left the room but me. And I met these guys, and my younger brother Micah met these guys, and we started putting together this business plan. We were going to revolutionize wireless roaming networks. So in 2000, you couldn't walk around on the internet. But these guys had found an antenna technology that could. You could roam at T1 speeds on the internet in the year 2000. And our entry point, we were going to wirelessly network the Winter Olympic Games in Salt Lake. Now, when the technology turned out to be illegal, our business plan was done. We were done. Life lesson, don't do illegal things. It was actually an incredible education. We got a lot more attention than we probably deserved as a student team. And it absolutely jumped out on my resume once I decided that I needed some more education in a successful company before I launched my own business. So Intel loved that. I recommend that to you. Start a business in your undergrad years if you can. Fail at it if you have to. But get that experience. It's a rich and rewarding life. So that's a little bit on my background. Once I was a buyer at Intel, I was in that role for about 18 months before an experimental role in Intel's mergers and acquisitions integration group opened up. I happen to be the only person with a heavy background in writing, business startups, and purchasing, which were all three requirements of this job. And it helped that Intel was on hiring freeze, so I think I was actually the only one that applied for the job. And so they hired me. I was there for a couple years in this junior role when all at once the rest of the senior team left. One for medical reasons, one was hired away, one took a different job in Intel. And so here I was, 3 or 4 years out of undergrad, asked to take on a role of a 20-year veteran. And we did it, right? We kept our head above water for a couple years, patching things together, delegating and relying on people, and actually provided a great service for Intel. About that time, Microsoft contacted me and hired me away, and we've had a great time there. So that's my background in a nutshell. If you want the expanded, emotional, messy version, come have dinner at our house. We'll tell you all about it. Let's see here. Okay. Who here has heard of Steve Blank? Okay, a few hands, most of them in my class currently right now. Steve Blank has become sort of a hero of mine. This guy is a serial entrepreneur that went on to decide to have a family, and so now he's teaching at Stanford and Columbia and Berkeley, and I think has all the signs of inspiration surrounding him. He is summarizing things succinctly in a way that benefits other people. And he has thrown out this idea that there are truly 6 types of startups. Now, many of you think of startups generically, like I did a few weeks ago until he described this. But he said there are these startups, lifestyle. So this is the people who work only so they work as little as possible so they can surf more or golf more or read more. The small business is a person who's looking to have an income. The scalable business is the one we hear the most about. This is the Facebooks and the others that come up with some small kernel of an idea, often get venture capital funding, and then blow it up into a huge idea. The viable business, Steve points out, is a business that is built not to last on its own merits, but built literally with the goal of being bought out in a short amount of time. These companies often have no ability to have revenue. They simply create a really neat widget, and their goal is to be purchased. Large companies, we'll talk about that more here in a second. And then social entrepreneurship. We have Sister Johnson here, our resident expert, and many of you have toyed around with social entrepreneurship. You actually know more than I do. Now, what Steve points out is that these are the types of startups. What he doesn't call out, and maybe I should tell him about this, is that often the reasons for starting the business aren't where the business ends up. Okay? Many businesses that start off as lifestyle businesses become scalable or viable or small business or lifestyle helpful. So when you're thinking of your business, realize once you start something, you may end up in an entirely different place. You may start rain or surf and think it's a lifestyle business and suddenly scale it out globally. You may start Facebook so that you can connect with your friends and have an improved lifestyle, and suddenly it becomes the world's largest example of a scalable business. You might start Skype thinking that this is a way to connect with people, and maybe we can sell advertising, but you actually never reach profitability. And suddenly you are more of a buyable business. You need to be bought by somebody else. So start with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey says, but realize that end is rarely foreseeable. Now a little bit into my area of expertise. These scalable startups are mostly what happens in the tech sector where I've spent my career. These are businesses where you're producing a software or hardware component, and your goal is to produce more and get better volume with economies of scale and work through the transition of gaining customers, build a brand, and become a large company. This is the story for both of my largest employers. This was Intel's story, it is Microsoft's story. That transition box in the middle is a painful box, but one that these two companies have weathered amazingly well. Now, once you've reached large company status, there is a huge effort in sustaining innovation. This is staying ahead of the curve. This is Microsoft trying to continue to stay ahead of Apple. Intel trying to stay ahead of AMD. And these two companies have done better at it than most. Now, there is a term called disruptive innovation that Elder Christensen, Clayton Christensen, coined a few, I guess probably 20 years ago now. He wrote a book called The Innovators Dilemma. If you haven't read it, you should. And Brother Christensen recognized that once you reach large company status, you're most often not upset by another large company. You sort of have your turf lined out. Instead, you are upset or overturned by something you never even recognized as a competitor. Example is right now, both Intel and Microsoft they look at Facebook and Google as their main competitors. Facebook and Google aren't in microprocessors, and they aren't in enterprise software or Word. So they started off as a social network and a search engine, and suddenly they are challenging the territory of these entrenched giants. So, Brother Christensen called this disruptive technology or disruptive innovation. Now, how a large company like Microsoft or Intel deals with this is they actually go out and build or partner or acquire that technology. Literally, there will be widget.com and Intel will say, oh, wait a minute, we either can't do that or we're worried that they will get into our territory, so Intel will go out and make them an offer that widget.com can't refuse. They will buy them for more than widget.com thinks they're worth. Or they'll partner with widget.com's top competitor and compete head-on, or they'll simply hire more people and try and build a competitor themselves. Now here with the small check marks, the IP, talent, customers, and business, these are the top reasons that a large company acquires a small company. IP is intellectual property, for those of you who might not know. And intellectual property encompasses patents, copyrights, and trademarks, and trade secrets. And this is becoming what will be the #1 battleground in many of your careers, where The idea of a patent was initially created to protect the entrepreneur. You come up with a good idea, you want to be able to take it to market and have some protection. Today, big companies are compiling war chests of IP. How many can they get? And they're actually using it, I feel, again, I'm not speaking for my employer, to stifle innovation. Google just bought Motorola's phone business. It's not because they needed the technology, it's because it came with 18,000 patents. And they want to be able to protect those patents and sue their competitors based on those patents to protect themselves. Add to this complexity that this massive new economy called China is coming on board, who has a completely different way of looking at intellectual property. You've heard of communism? That literally means holding things in common. If you have it, that means we have it. So the idea of a patent is not natural there, and is still undetermined, as far as I can tell, where that will shake out. Now, I thought we'd spend the majority of the rest of my slides on actually how the process works, the acquisition process, how a big company looks at your future company as an entrepreneur. And I'll spend most of the time on Microsoft's model. Now, you can think of Microsoft not as Windows or as Xbox or as Microsoft Office, but as these top-line divisions. They literally have hundreds of independent products and thousands of different versions of those products. It's an amazingly complex model. Now, each of those top-line divisions, the chevrons across the top of the slide, has an executive vice president who has the authority to make decisions for his or her division. They also, now this is a bit of an eye chart, those top lines from the previous slide now are down the left-hand column. Those are the divisions. Built into those divisions, they have people who specialize in strategy, business development, corporate development, those things, okay? They independently make decisions. Xbox will say, we need a game in addition to Halo. We need something in the kids space. And they have people who know the entire world of kids games, right? Now, Microsoft has chosen to let them act independently to a degree. They have chosen under Microsoft CFO to create this venture integration team, which is where my job exists today. Our job in venture integration is to work with the product groups to go out and look at potential acquisitions, to specialize in auditing and understanding every cell of that target's organism, literally to understand what happened on what date 10 years ago, who owns what, etc. And then to plan how that division would bring that target company into Microsoft and eventually deliver value. My job as an integration director is similar to a general contractor. I'm in that top row, venture integration management. I have a finance, a technical, and human resource representative on my core team, and depending on the deal, any of those other functions has a representative. So I organize their work as we go out and look at a company and look at bringing it into Microsoft. Put another way, when you think as a senior vice president about your strategy as a business group and recognize the need for acquisition, you engage these groups to deliver the items that are along their lines with the goal of actually acquiring the company. In a big company, each of those groups are stakeholders. If, for example, the corporate development folks, that blue line across the middle of the screen, disagree with the venture integration folks, the green line, we are responsible for working through those disagreements if the deal is going to move forward. Okay, so it's a complex. To give you an idea of bodies, on the Skype acquisition that Microsoft just closed in the last year, there were literally 300 people working on the deal. Okay, lots and lots of coordination when you're talking about an $8.5 billion acquisition. On the other side of the equation, I helped Microsoft buy one person for $1 million in an acquisition called Clickstream in probably 2009. Small CEO who had found out how to trace everything you do on a computer, and Microsoft wanted that capability. So massive array, but we use the same process for every acquisition, no matter the size. Now, this slide hasn't, I haven't posted the most recent one, but this was last refreshed in 2010. So since 2007, Microsoft has probably acquired 80 companies. If you go back beyond that, Microsoft has acquired well over 100 companies in the 10-year window that I have been aware of. Okay, each of these companies represent lives, right? These were CEOs that, like you in your future company, were super passionate about their product, their capability, their team, their customers. They lost sleep. They lost their appetites, right? Each one of these companies, think of this, these are thousands of lives that were disrupted, all in the name of business. And that's an interesting statistic that even though those people lost sleep and lost their appetites and lost their hair and gained their weight and all those painful parts about entrepreneurship, our statistics show that the vast majority, something like 90% plus of CEOs leave the acquiring company as soon as they can. They go back to that stressful state of entrepreneurship because they love it. We heard from Pete Johnson here a couple of weeks ago in this lecture series that he's working. He'd been acquired and he couldn't wait to get back out the door, right? So there's something beautiful and addictive about entrepreneurship, and big companies, for some reason, can't produce it on their own. We rely on the disruptive technologies and innovation that happens out in the wild. Just to give you a different way of looking at this, the number of deals a big company does per year, Google is breaking this. They're acquiring over 100 companies a year right now. Now, this will get us sort of the tail end of my slides. When I was at Intel, I joined the M&A integration group in about 2002, about 2002. And they had just completed their largest year of acquisitions in history. In 2002, Intel acquired 28 companies. They had a large team working full-time on it. From there, with the bursting of the dot-com bubble, Intel found themselves with a lot of resources and assets that they had discovered would not be good long-term businesses for them. And so we actually spent the next 5 years selling the companies or remnants of the companies that we had bought the previous 5 years. Is that sick or what? Right? I mean, typically we'd buy these companies, and I won't name names or large numbers, but you would buy a company, and by the time you would divest it, there had been enough customer or employee departure that you could sell the company maybe for 10 cents on the dollar. And often, I've discovered you would actually sell the company back to the people you'd bought it from. Now that's a good business if you can get into it, right? And a few people have sold companies a number of times. So interestingly enough, I had seen that arc, that 28 deals at the peak, and then this slide, and the number of acquisitions started to peter off, and the number of divestitures started to increase. And I came to Microsoft in 2008. In 2008, Microsoft acquired 28 companies. Guess what was happening next, right? They had peaked. This was their banner year of acquisitions. And in 2009, right, I was a newbie. I had just come out of my training, and I said, oh, I've seen this before. You're going to start to divest. And everybody looked at me and went, newbie, right? You're too green. You don't know. Divestiture is failure. We will never divest a company. I turned out to be a prophet, right? It was amazing how much respect I got in that next year as the number of divestitures went through the roof. And I took the process that I had written for Intel and applied it in Microsoft. This trend has continued, and Microsoft continues to seek to spin out businesses it acquired before as it focuses more and more on its core businesses. So step back, macro view, you have in a booming economy big companies who are being disrupted and needing new growth platforms. They spend billions of dollars acquiring. Economy crashes. They need to get back to their core business. They start divesting. There's an ecosystem around the buying and selling of businesses, and the entrepreneur is at the heart of it. Creating, selling, building, selling, buying back, refixing, and hopefully selling again. And many of you could choose to do this with your careers. Now, the reasons for spinning out, actually, I'm pretty bored with this slide, so I won't waste it. Guiding principles for a divestiture process. As you can imagine, in a big company, when rumor mill starts that, oh, our division's not profitable again for the 5th straight year, and we have a new vice president, we might be divested. Suddenly, there's a lot of emotion. It means that teams like mine who are helping sell these companies need to act in complete confidentiality and keep things discreet. To give you an idea of how discreet something can be, when HP bought Compaq, This was the largest technology merger of all time at that point. 6 people total in HP knew about the deal. Okay, so keeping this massive decision understood and known about by a small number of people is no easy task. The other things, acting with speed and change management, are sort of buzzwords that I won't bore you with. And there's our beautiful banner, right? Your potential, our passion. You could actually reverse that and say your passion is our potential, if when you're thinking about acquiring entrepreneurs. Now, so going back to my initial thoughts on what I could provide you, a little bit in my background, which you've seen now, and a little bit about mergers and acquisitions. I can tell you maybe one more thing about, for those of you who are wondering, is this something I would do? We never at any point looked and said, 12 years from now, we are going to be at BYU Hawaii on medical leave after spending a career in mergers and acquisitions. You just don't see the end from the beginning, or the midpoint from the beginning. Elder Crittenden in Tuesday's devotional said it beautifully. Often you just get the next step. You open yourself up to those next steps by being spiritually in tune. And who knows what that next step will lead to. You may do things, you will do things if you follow the Spirit that you could have never pictured possible for you and your family. I know that's true. And that's it for today. All right. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any. Those in my class will be graded on whether they ask a smart question. No pressure. Actually, those in my class and those who are my neighbors. No pressure, honestly.
I have one for you relate to this, the confidentiality and doing deals. We did some in our company as well, but can you talk a little bit about how you maintain that, and yet you're able to get the research done and the concept of making decisions without having all the information you really would like to have?
In a big company, big companies are amazingly risk averse. So they're not comfortable saying, in the name of confidentiality, we're just going to make a decision without the information. Instead, they'll say, we're going to hire a Deloitte or a PwC or an Ernst & Young, who are professional due diligence and execution firms. So they will actually outsource some of the task of research to other firms who are exceptional at confidentiality.
So is there another team that's like the scouting team to go find the businesses to buy? As an entrepreneur, how do you put yourself out there if you're, okay, I think we're in a position where I can buy or be acquired?
That's a great company, or a great idea. Great company. You should start that. That's amazing, Rachel. So yes, how do you bring yourself to the attention of a potential acquirer? Typically, you do that by getting good press. If you can, I'm thinking of the CEO of a firm called Glimpse. Anybody have Glimpse on their phone? You should go and look it up. Glimpse is a free app that allows you to share your location in real time with anybody you choose based on your phone. So any of your friends, once you've given them the right, can sort of track you and stalk you online. Who doesn't want that, right? Right? So, Brian Trussell is the CEO of Glimpse and also happens to be the Young Men's president of our Seattle ward. They went out and created this app and then started going to every trade show related to mobile applications. They started talking to the press and getting some buzz around who they were. Last year, when was it? About 8 months ago, they were named the coolest app in Fast Company magazine. A lot of venture capitalists suddenly go, I want Glimpse, I want people to stalk me, right? And so getting yourself out there is a matter of being out there in the ecosystem, being in the community. And I don't know there's another magic way than that. YouTube is a new marketing tool that is blowing the doors off old things. It used to be that you would cold call. Now you put your widget on YouTube and do it well, and suddenly people know who you are. Pam.
I want you to go back to your BYU Provo days and tell students a little bit about why you got into writing and how important you think that is to different careers.
So that's a great question. I should have Zeb come up here for this. He's in the English department.
Every business I've ever started has failed.
So writing's role in business. I don't know why I got into writing other than that I love literature. I've always, one of my, what I think are spiritual gifts is feeling the Spirit through the written word. Because that's one of the things that I have always been drawn to, I have a high appreciation for those people who can express themselves through that medium, and as a result of exposure, started to be able to write better myself. I was actually brought onto the Skybeam team as a business plan writer. I was an active writing fellow at BYU Provo. So writing became an important part of sort of who I was. It was no small surprise, I guess, when I had a shiny resume. I could write one. And when I could write thank you letters and introduction letters, I think it opened doors for me. How it served me in my career, good writing requires good thinking. And actually, you can use writing to refine your thinking. Those in my class, your business plans, one of the reasons for those is to make you think better. When a sentence doesn't make sense, often it's because the concept behind it doesn't make sense. You have to change the concept. So good writing equates to good thinking. The best business thought leaders are also the best writers. And you'll see that in Steve Blank and Stephen Covey and some of the other amazing authors out there are great business thinkers. But it has served me well from everything from piecing together presentations to writing emails to thinking how I'm going to de-escalate a really mad entrepreneur. Writing down those thoughts helps. So I recommend all of you work on your writing. Any other questions?
How long does the process, have you seen, does it take on average of a large company like Microsoft to acquire, from start to finish?
So this can be a case of the tail wagging the dog, right? The most recent acquisition I did was of a company in Austin, Texas called Twisted Pixel Games. Small company, 25 guys. You walk in their doors, it felt like a frat house. They were on fold-up tables and pizza boxes and all this. They called us and said, we just received an offer from your top competitor. We need to answer them by Monday. Do you guys want to do anything about it? And we were at their offices the next day with a competing offer and close the deal in 20 days. That's not generally the rule. The general rule is something like 60 to 90 days from our initial contact. But a big company, if the target company is critical to strategy, can move fast. With large numbers, when you're talking about billions of dollars, they never move fast. Yeah, please.
Have you been tempted to purchase one of the companies that Microsoft is selling?
All the time. I have a half-written business plan around the idea. If I can get past my current distractions, you'll probably hear about us in the press. All right, I think that's it. Thank you very, very much.